Excellencies, dear colleagues, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to who is with us on WebEx and to who is now or later watching this video. We have the pleasure to welcome you today for a new session of the Geneva Beat Plastic Pollution Dialogues, which have kept the international community in Geneva and beyond engaged on this topic during the past months, making links with numerous international processes to tackle plastic pollution and with the United Nations Environment Assembly. These dialogues are organized by the Geneva Environment Network in collaboration with the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Convention Secretariat, the Center for International Environmental Law, the Global Governance Center at the Graduate Institute, IUCN, Norway, Switzerland, and the Forum on Trade, Environment, and the Sustainable Development Goals, referred to as TESS. A few more organizations today, the ones our panelists represent, have partnered with us to propose this special session, organized on the occasion of the International Mountain Day, which will be formally celebrated tomorrow on 11th of December around the world. While much attention in recent years has focused on the impacts of plastic waste on the world's oceans, pollution in mountains regions is more rarely making headlines. Plastic is the most common type of waste found in mountains, and the main origin is tourism. And we have also, and you will hear a lot on this from our panelists today. So I'm not going to add anything here, but I wanted to bring to attention that we have also highlighted in the past session of these Beat Plastic Pollution Dialogues. At one session held exactly 1 year ago, that airborne micro and nanoplastic are transported in the more remote places of this planet, including on mountains. We encourage you to have a look at the page of that particular session if you missed it. Our discussions on plastics in mountains at the Geneva Environment Network started back in 2018, a year where the United Nations Environment Program was starting putting a lot of more resources in beating plastic pollution. We held at the Environment House in Geneva a roundtable on plastics in the mountains that somehow led to the project Plastic Waste in Remote and Mountain Areas that will also be presented today. At that time, Lesia, who is part of our panel today, it was her idea to have that session. And some of the panelists that we have with us today were physically with us 3 years ago in Geneva. And we are very happy to have them back today again. And before we go into depth on the topic we're addressing today, let me just remind you that the documents presented, the summary, as well as the video of the dialogue will be made available on the webpage of this event. We will share the link in the chat. And throughout the event, you can raise your questions by using the Q&A box. We will use your questions to feed the discussion after the presentations. The moderator of this session today is Damaris Secarnal, who is the new focal point for the United Nations Environment Program of Switzerland. And we are very happy to have her on board today. And with that, over to you, Damaris.
Thank you very much, Diana, and good morning or afternoon or evening, excellencies and colleagues. I want to first thank you, Diana and Jen, for organizing such a timely and insightful event. I think we can all agree that plastic pollution is a global challenge that will require a comprehensive and coordinated action. Engagement of all is needed, not only governments, international organizations, industry and business, and of course, civil society. It is therefore really great to have with us such a great panel that will enable us to get different perspectives. As Diana said, much of the attention is still on the impacts of plastic waste on the world oceans, and pollution in mountains regions are not often discussed. This is why we believe it is so important to understand that plastic pollution is affecting all compartments of the environment, and that 80% of plastics ending up in the seas do in fact come from land-based sources, and that we really need to develop a comprehensive life cycle approach if we are to tackle this issue properly. It will also not come as a surprise that plastic is the most common type of waste found in mountains, and that, as it was mentioned previously, microplastic pollution has now been discovered in snow close to the peak, for example, of Mount Everest and in other mountains. Urbanizations and tourism have been one of the main drivers of the rapid increase in plastic waste, adding, of course, to the challenge. Dealing with plastic waste is a challenge for all countries, let's face it, but mountainous regions face specific challenges in addressing plastic waste due notably to harsh climate, remoteness, limited land availability for waste treatment and disposal, and of course, sometimes weak infrastructure. Many mountainous regions, especially in developing countries, have limited capacity and infrastructures to prevent the generation of plastic waste and ensure its environmentally sound management. It therefore makes waste collection and safe disposal even more challenging than in the urban lowlands. It seems that another challenge is some data gap on the volume and types of waste being generated in order to understand the problem and bottlenecks specific to sound waste management mountain areas. And I'm confident that today we'll learn more about this. To address plastic pollution, many initiatives, projects, and government responses and options have been developed, but we are still unable to cope with the amount of plastic we generate. In addition, there's also a lack of coordination at the global level that prevent us to have a more effective and efficient response. This is why Switzerland is supporting the launch of a process to develop a legally binding instrument on plastic pollution at UNEA 5.2 at the end of February next year. Such a global agreement, and we might learn more during the panel, should have a life cycle approach and take into account plastic in all compartments of the environment and focus on both upstream and downstream activities and measures. But of course, negotiating a treaty will take time and will not solve everything. The need for concrete initiatives and innovative approaches to deal with plastic pollution in the mountains is therefore critical, and I very much look forward to the discussion. Not only to understand better the challenges, but also, and maybe more importantly, on what we can do about it. I have already spoken too much, and without further ado, I would like to give the floor to the first speaker, Patrick Omoza, who will offer us the perspective of a developing country in dealing with plastic waste in the mountains. Patrick is an international environmental agreements officer at the Rwanda Environment Management Authority, and in that capacity, he has notably contributed to the implementation of the MEAs in Rwanda by providing legal advice regarding ratification and accession to new conventions. Patrick, if you're ready, you have the floor.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to represent my country in this impactful event. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, greetings from Rwanda. Allow me to express my gratitude to organizers of this event that reminds us our role towards clean and green mountain. As we are celebrating the World Mountain Day, it's time for us to think about our contribution towards the clean environment. So we can only beat plastic waste by joining hands as international community. This may be achieved if countries come together and establish a specific tool like binding agreements that will direct them with a common understanding and actions, as Rwanda and Peru have already started paving it through draft resolution on international legally binding instrument on plastic pollution. Biodiversity has no voice. We are the one to advocate for it as it is part of our life. Single-use plastics corrupted companies and a number of people's mind up to the extent that they are not interested in looking for alternative to single-use plastics. Since 1986, Rwanda joined hands with international community through ratification and accession of different multilateral environmental agreements. In 2003, living in a clean and healthy environment became a constitutional right to each Rwandan citizens. After finding out that plastic carry bags are enemies to clean and healthy environment, we started thinking on what can be done to ensure that the above said right is protected. In 2008, Rwanda adopted a law prohibiting manufacturing, importation, exportation, and use of plastic carry bags. This was a strong decision taken as plastic carry bags was become a primary tool to our citizens. Political will and awareness raising on the negative impact of plastic carry bags are the only weapon of success which led to the Rwandans' behavioral change. The law of 2008 gave us a true image of plastic-free lives. In 2019, Rwanda amended the law and included single-use plastics. Today, no one is allowed to import, export, manufacture, sell, and use of plastic carry bags and single-use plastics in Rwanda. It's been 2 years ago since plastic carry bags are banned in Rwanda, but we are still seeing plastic waste in remote areas and mountains. This proves the gravity of how plastic waste are burdening our environment. However, REMA, in collaboration with the local community and authorities, organizes community works as a homegrown solution to clean environment as well as mountain and remote areas. People come together and collect all plastics in selected areas and use such opportunity as awareness raising tool on raw burning and importation, exportation, manufacturing, use and sale of plastic bags in Rwanda. Having laws in place is better and their enforcement is paramount. We are facing with different challenges that require us to work in extraordinary way to ensure that the proper enforcement of all legal instruments in place. One man has this battle is not one man cannot win this battle. Countries are required to join hands and work together as families to protect and save our common mother. By doing this, REMA joined efforts with the national policies and other key institutions which are helping us to carry out a regular inspection and in different supermarkets and shopping malls to ensure that no plastic carry bags and single-use plastic are manufactured, imported, and sold in Rwanda. Beverages companies with no alternative were given a fixed grace period and obliged to look for alternative to single-use plastics. For the proper management of plastic waste generated by those companies, the environment levy is being imposed to them so as to enable recycling companies to collect and recycle the generated wastes. Having our mountain and biodiversity clean does not make Rwanda safe from plastic waste pollution. Environment has no border. Global effort is needed to save our common shelter from plastic waste pollution. Biodiversity is seriously suffering, and it's time for actions and save our planet. I cannot conclude without saying that developing countries become the dump site of the developed country due to unfair international trade. Women and children from poor families don't have a choice. They must risk their safety to make a living and provide for their families. Due to the millions and millions of tons dumped in Africa, we don't have capacity to recycle them. To reduce them, they are aside. Most of plastic wastes are dumped in mountain or remote areas, and some people choose to burn them with which is highly hazardous to human health and environment. So we cannot turn our clock back to the society that survived without single-use plastics. But today, we have the power to shape the future life with plastic-free lives. Let's start now. Let's action speak rather than words. Our behavior matters. If you can't reuse it, please refuse it and save our mountain from being the dump site of the plastic wastes. So I use this opportunity and thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you so much, Patrick, for these powerful words and for sharing Rwanda's experience and the measures you've been taking, as well as the challenges the country is still facing. And also, thank you very much for Rwanda's leadership, notably on the resolution on the legally binding instruments on plastic pollution. This is also a great effort. We will now hear from our second speaker, Björn, who on the results of the 2021 Global Waste in the Mountains survey. Björn is a senior expert on polar and the climate at the Grid Arendal, focusing notably on biodiversity, waste management, and climate change adaptation issues. Björn, you have the floor.
Thank you. Diana, do I have control of the PowerPoint? Or okay, now I do. Okay, well, thank you very much, everyone, and thank you for joining. I'm going to be talking about a global survey we ran on waste in mountains that basically looked at, tried to get the opinions of mountaineers and other mountain enthusiasts in the world. Because what we found was that actually there was a lot of attention in a few sites, for example, on Mount Everest and a few other summit peaks, but we didn't really have data on what was going on, around the world. So that was the attempt of this survey. And this was made possible actually with partnership with a few different partners. We have UNEP on board, we had the Basel Secretariat, and then we had the mountaineering federations like UIA, the Mountain Guides Federation, IFMGA, Mountain Research Initiative, UIMLA, which is the Union of International Mountain Leaders Associations, and we also teamed up with the Kilian Jornet Foundation to make this possible. Okay, yes. So here you see basically a map of the respondents from the survey. What we found was actually through our next works, we were able to reach over 1,700 different respondents. The majority of those came from Europe and from North America, but we did have quite a good participation from South America and also from Asian countries of India and Nepal. Unfortunately, we didn't have as much response from the continent of Africa, so that's just something to bear in mind. We also, majority of people were members of alpine clubs or mountaineering clubs, and majority was also male respondents, although roughly 2/3 to 1/3. So I think probably this is the most important finding from the survey, actually. And in the survey, we asked people, what sort of types of waste they've seen, what volumes of waste they've seen, where have they seen it on the mountains, and what the trends have been. And what we see here is actually that hard plastics and soft plastics are the most important or the most widely seen types of waste found on the mountains. But this kind of global picture hides, some peculiarities. So within the survey, we actually were able to reach 400 mountain guides, and they actually noticed a higher level of human waste than the kind of general public. And that's perhaps to do with their guiding practices and the fact that they spend multiple days in the mountains. But this is quite a really important study. And I think in certain regions like Asia and Africa, electronic waste was actually higher than the global average. And the picture on the left is I think it's a nice illustration to show what sort of waste we typically find on the mountains. So you can see there's plastic bottles, cigarette packs, then you have these small kind of wrappers at the bottom there, chocolate, Mars bars, those sorts of things, then metal cans, energy drinks, and then equipment such as ski goggles being placed there as well. And this actually photo was taken in the Austrian Alps. Hopefully you can see this image, but basically we asked respondents where they can see waste on the mountains, and what we found was actually that it's quite predictable where we can find waste. So car parks at the bottom of the mountains was an area where waste was seen the most, and then we have trailheads. Besides the trails and resting areas are all important areas. Summits not so much. And refuges also are important. We found that sort of crevasses, caves, lakes in forests were less seen, and this is possibly because the respondents actually spend most of the time on the trails. And so I think this is a positive news for the community in the large state, in that actually responding to this waste issue should be fairly predictable. We know where the sites will be, as in tourists tend to follow predictable trails up the mountains and down the mountains. In terms of how much waste is seen during a typical mountain trip, we found that actually most European respondents said they saw little to none or could fill a top pocket. And actually, yeah, 46% of the global respondents said they could fill a top pocket. If we move to the right, where we get into volumes of higher volumes, for example, full rucksack or several rucksacks, this kind of relatively low figure of 6% hides important regional differences. For example, in Asia and in Africa, over 60% of the respondents said they could see ways to fill one or more rucksacks. So I think there's some important regional differences here. In terms of the cause of littering, we asked actually respondents to sort of rate different statements in terms of who's causing the litter. And what we find is that littering or negligence by mountain users themselves is the highest rating. We asked a rating of 1 to 5 stars, and that figure there, 4.36, indicates that that was the highest rating. But we also have poor waste management in resting areas as a possible issue. So people want to manage their waste, but they don't have facilities. Illegal dumping was also scored high, and the unintentional loss of waste was also scored high. So I think here's already an indication of where we can work to solve this problem. And finally, when we asked the respondents about solutions to the waste problem, and we gave them a few statements, and actually 90% of all respondents, 90% of 1,700 respondents thought that the adoption of the principle of take in, take out should be strongly adhered to in mountains. 79% also thought that more education on the impacts of litter is needed, and 66% found that there was a need for more sustainable and reusable alternatives. And these results are very consistent across all the regions. So I think here we have a strong mandate for education, for working on more sustainable issues with industry and with the equipment providers, and generally on working on this take in, take out principle. We asked who should also be responsible for mountain cleanup activities. And here again, we had quite a strong consistency, where 86% of global respondents thought individuals should be responsible. In second place, we found that tourism and trekking associations should be responsible. In third place, environment NGOs, and in fourth place, the private sector. This global figure hides an important regional difference. In Asia, the respondents felt that tourism and trekking associations, as well as municipalities, should play a very strong role. And that's perhaps due to the fact that many of the opportunities for mountaineering in these regions are actually run through these associations. So people feel that they have more responsibility for it. In fourth place, environmental NGOs, who often do the cleanups, they were in third place, indicates that I think respondents really feel that this is a personal responsibility and that more needs to be done at an individual level to improve waste management. So that's really a brief overview of some of the key results. You can read more at the link in the chat there, or you can Google plastic on the peak. We also will have a report forthcoming probably in January, which dives more into the details. And you should feel free to contact myself and my colleague Laurent, who worked closely with me on this work. And to wrap up, I'd like to thank all the participating organizations who made this possible. Without the Mountaineering Federations, without UNEP, and without BRS and Kilian Jornet Foundation, we wouldn't have been able to reach such a large group. So I'd like to end there and thank everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Björn. And I think the key results and observation from the survey are really insightful. It gives us a better understanding on the main issues, but also a prospect for solutions, and point well taken also on take in, take out principle and the importance of education. It is now my pleasure to give the floor to Joost Dittrist so that he can provide us with some more information on possible trends and policy recommendations to address plastic waste in the mountains. Joost is a program officer in the Science and Technical Assistance branch at the Secretariat of the BRS Conventions. He has primarily focuses on the provision of technical assistance activities on the prevention and minimization, environmentally sound management, and control of transboundary movements of plastic waste. Joost, you have the floor.
Thank you very much indeed, Damaris. And it's a great pleasure to be here in this panel with such exciting speakers on occasion of the International Mountain Day, which is quite fitting because as I look out of the window, I have a lot of snow here in Lausanne. So I feel this is the right moment to share some insights about plastic waste in the mountains. So distinguished participants and colleagues, as we have just heard, plastic is the most common type of waste found in the mountains. I would like to address three related questions. First, what drives plastic pollution in the mountains? Second, why is it particularly challenging to ensure the environmentally sound management of plastic in the mountains? And finally, how can we make progress in addressing plastic pollution in the mountains? In doing so, I will draw on findings from research being undertaken for a forthcoming report on plastic waste in remote and mountainous areas, which the BRS Secretariat is currently preparing in the context of a project financed by the governments of Norway and France. So turning to the first question, as in other areas, increasing economic growth translates into increasing consumption of plastic products and thus increasing generation of plastic waste. This is also true in the mountains. But adding to this, there is a significant plastic waste footprint of tourism, including related to construction. Tourism generates disproportionate amounts of single-use plastics and non-recyclable waste. Tourists also tend to generate more plastic waste per capita than local populations. For example, research conducted in the Carpathians showed a strong relationship between the growing number of tourists and the growing number of municipal solid waste, including plastic waste. In one community, tourism prompted a 38-fold increase in plastic waste generation per capita within just 3 years. Popular mountain tourist destinations such as the Himalaya summit or the Kilimanjaro have thus become plastic waste hotspots. This is particularly concerning because plastic waste often contains persistent organic pollutants used as additives. This ranges from packaging to clothing and other mountain equipment as well. And yet there's another dimension, as we have already heard, namely that microplastics travel long distances through the atmosphere and end up in significant quantities in mountainous areas. So studies have found so-called plastic rain in the Alps, in the Pyrenees, in the Rocky Mountains, and in the Tibetan Plateau. Now let us move to the second question. Why is it particularly challenging to ensure the environmentally sound management of plastic waste in the mountains? Many mountainous areas face several compounding challenges in ensuring the environmentally sound management of plastic waste. This includes remoteness, limited access to infrastructure, high transport costs, lack of economies of scale, and so on. Mountainous areas tend to have, globally speaking, lower levels of economic development and thus limited access to human and financial resources. The ESM of plastic waste is therefore particularly challenging for mountainous areas in less developed countries. This often results in lower collection rates, for example. Similarly, functioning transport and separation systems, sanitary landfills, and recycling capacities are often not in place. So this leads then to increased rates of open dumping, including illegal dumping, as well as open burning of plastic waste in mountainous areas, which has been observed in many countries, such as, for example, in the Himalayas. Now let's have a quick look how what we discussed so far leads to adverse effects on mountain ecosystems and human health. So here you can see the variables that I've just discussed: the atmospheric transport, increasing tourism, increasing consumption, leading to increasing plastic waste in mountains, which in turn leads to open burning and illegal dumping. And coming back to the atmospheric transport, that also leads directly to releases. So all of this causes releases of plastic waste. And that in turn causes adverse effects on mountain ecosystems and human health. Now, meanwhile, we have the issue that I just mentioned, that there's limited access to resources and infrastructure, lack of economies of scale, difficult natural conditions, remoteness, and transport costs. This in turn leads to high costs and lack of financing mechanisms, insufficient legal and institutional frameworks, and lack of information and monitoring. Further, this then causes the situation that we are faced with in such areas, namely a lack of infrastructure for the ESM of plastic waste, as well as a lack of awareness and incentives to address the issue. And this in turn then leads back to open burning, illegal dumping, and other practices, which in turn have adverse effects on mountain ecosystems and human health. However, this is not the whole story. Indeed, at many of these variables, we can actually intervene. So now you see some green arrows coming up as examples where we could intervene. So for example, in line with the theme of the International Mountain Day, tourism can be rendered more sustainable, for example, by working with tourists and tour operators to reduce their plastic waste footprint. We can also address increasing consumption, for instance, through the use of plastic-free alternatives or scaling up recycling. We can also extend producer responsibility systems, fees, and other financial mechanisms can be implemented. Governments can act, for example, by banning the use of certain single-use plastics. Monitoring systems can be established and data gathered, including in the context of national plastic waste inventories, to help inform decision-making. Collection and separation systems can be implemented. Often small interventions can already make a big difference, such as ensuring the availability of containers at tourist hotspots. Further, awareness-raising campaigns can lead to behavior change among tourists and locals alike. And finally, for the plastic waste that has already been generated, of course, we can engage in cleanup campaigns to help remediate the problem. So now, as we have seen, I need to go back on this one, sorry. Okay, sorry. So as we have seen, there are a large number of strategies available. To conclude my intervention, what I would like to emphasize here, in addition, is that we need to take action at all levels. At the local level, municipalities often carry the responsibility for running effective waste management schemes. Administrations of protected areas can implement schemes to prevent plastic products from being dumped. Mountain guides can educate tourists and lead by example. And of course, each individual can make a difference by making sure that all plastic waste brought to the mountains is also taken back. But as we have heard, resources for the ESM of plastic waste are often lacking at the local level to provide an appropriate national, legal, and institutional framework, whether it is by banning certain types of plastic waste or providing fiscal incentives. Furthermore, as mountains tend to not respect national boundaries, cross-border cooperation is critical. Finally, we also need to act globally, and indeed there are numerous initiatives at this level. So to conclude, for example, and even if such partnerships and multilateral environmental agreements have a global scope, they will also help to protect our mountains. This is because where plastic waste has adverse effects on a range of ecosystems, such as the mountains, plastic pollution is an issue of global concern. And as we have seen with the plastic rain, and as has been highlighted by the Conference of the Parties of the Basel Convention and others, as regards the Basel Convention, the plastic waste amendments specify categories of plastic waste and mixtures of plastic waste generated by parties that are subject to the control procedures for transboundary movements. They are also subject to the provisions pertaining to waste minimization and environmentally sound management. And indeed, given the yet insufficient infrastructure in many mountain regions, an increased effort on preventing and minimizing the generation of plastic waste may be a promising strategy, especially in the short to medium term, which is also in line with the waste hierarchy as outlined in the ESM framework of the Basel Convention. To support governments, the Conference of the Parties also established the Plastic Waste Partnership. Moreover, the Secretariat is providing technical assistance to strengthen capacities of parties to address plastic waste. For example, as part of previously mentioned project on plastic waste in remote and mountainous areas, we are currently preparing pilot projects to replicate success stories in North Macedonia and in Peru. Last but not least, various plastic additives that are persistent organic pollutants are regulated under the Stockholm Convention. So while further action is needed at all of these levels, the good news is that efforts are already underway, and some of the speakers today will explore these in more detail. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Joost. It was really a very informative presentation, not only on the driver of plastic pollution, but also where we can act, and also point taken on the necessity to work at all level, from local to global. And I think it was also very helpful that you were able to highlight what's going on under the Basel Convention, but also Stockholm. This is of course very important work. So without further ado, we'll now hear from Leif Igne Magnusson, who's the president of the Environmental and Sustainable Access Commission and the International Federation of Mountain Guide Associations, who will now give us a practical perspective of how also mountain guides can contribute to addressing this issue. Leif, you have the floor.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for giving me this opportunity. Because I'm representing the International Mountain Guides Association. That means I'm representing 7,000 mountain guides who is working stemming from 25 countries, and lately Georgia also come on board in our association. So this is an important topic to us. So next, please. So we are working in an international group with these topics within the IFMJ. Of course, this also goes to policy making on one side and practical training on the other side, which I will show in a short minutes. So the Environmental and Sustainable Access Committee consists of myself and then Angela Hoss of the American Mountain Guides Association, Juliana Garcia of the Ecuadorian Mountain Guides Association, Mark Charlton of the British Mountain Guides Association, together with Mark Diggins from the British Mountain Guides Association, and Carl Lundberg of the Swedish Mountain Guides Association. In total, we represent a broad view on the possibilities and the prospects of how to deal with plastic waste and waste in general in mountains. And we have also signed up for the UN Sports for Climate Action Framework, which I will go back to at the end. Next, please. The basis of being a mountain guide trained by the IFMJ is that we all relate to a common code of conduct. And inside that code of conduct, it clarifies that the mountain guides should respect the conservation of nature. And this is something that's inside what all mountain guides need to be trained, and they also have to understand what this means in terms of waste. And in the guidelines of the IFMJ, it's highlighted, among other things, that we are responsible for removing waste from the excursions. But then, additionally, in practice, we also, by picking up litter on our way in the mountains. If you see something, we pick it up, put in the rucksack. That also provides an example for the people being together with the mountain guides on the mountain. This is something that all mountain guides do, and they are being role models. And this is kind of indirect pedagogy where you're leading by example and not sort of by putting out your index finger. So thank you. Next, please. This is one practical example. It said that 46% of the waste or the plastic waste was seen on the summit. This collection of old rope work or slings is taken from one of the Norwegian national parks, and it's from the pinnacles at the very top where you use slings around some rocks, and by that they can attach the rope and they can go down, abseiling to go off the mountain. But every time there comes a new climber, they add one more sling. So during a summer, this is not a very frequented mountain. So this is during 1 year maybe, that every new climber adds one more sling at the top of the pinnacle or at the summit to go down again. And this is from the Norwegian mountain guides training this summer. We can see that we started off without the slings, and I think the amount of waste just carried by one aspirant guide sort of signifies the problems and all the mountains that we visited. This happening again and again. We picked what we found. We replaced all these things with a new sling and just one. So this is a practical example where sort of the mountain guides can lead by example. Next, please. The things that I've been talking about now is the policy thing, but some mountain guides have also joined voluntarily the Stewardship declaration, which is going which is a value-oriented way of presenting or committing yourself to nature. So I think everyone should have a look at that and decide, is this something that I should sign up for or not? And it's a declaration where you sort of address your basic values. So next, please. So at the end of the talk, I will say that on the policy level, the association of the IFMJ and also the 28 now, member association of the IFMJ, we are working systematically to promote greater environmental responsibility. We try to reduce overall climate impact. We educate for climate action. We promote sustainable responsible consumption, and we advocate climate action through communication. And in all this, we also take care of our waste, and we most often they also are carrying other people's waste down from the mountain. So this is the broad idea and how we work in practice, but also in training. So I think that was what I would like to tell now in 7 minutes. So thank you. Thank you for giving us the opportunity.
Thank you very much for this and for the leadership also of the associations. I was very interested also to learn more about the code of conduct, and I'm sure there will be also other questions at the end. So thank you so much for sharing this with us. We will now hear from Carolina Adler on the role of mountaineers as mountain stewards. And Carolina is currently the president of the Mountain Protection Commission at the International Climbing and Mountaineering Federation. Carolina is a geographer and environmental scientific with over 25 years of professional experience, And in 2010, she completed an award-winning PhD on climate change adaptation in a mountain region. We're very happy to have you with us, and you have now the floor.
Thank you very much, Damaris, for the kind introduction, and very good morning or evening, afternoon, wherever you are in the world, and very glad to see you as well. Excellencies and dear colleagues, I have the opportunity here to indeed represent the UAA. I also carry another hat with the Mountain Research Initiative, but in this occasion I would like to tell you a little bit more about the sorts of activities that the UAA is doing precisely to address the issue of plastic waste. As Joost mentioned before, there are many solutions out there for how we could tackle this problem, and some of us do have some practical experience in articulating what could eventually be scaled as a solution for mountains worldwide. Next slide, please. So let me begin by mentioning a few words about the UAA. So this is an organization, a federation of organizations from all over the world dealing with upland clubs, was founded in 1932. So we've been around for quite some time. And at the moment, we are federating close to 90 members associations from 67 countries. And collectively, this is a collective individual number of over 3 million people. So this is quite a considerable constituency, if you like, of mountain enthusiasts who are very much passionate about their activities in the mountains. And mountain sustainability, it has been a core commitment of the UAA now for many years, establishing the Mountain Protection Commission in 1969, which continues to this day. And there are many activities that we are undertaking for the federations, our member federations, but also in partnership with other commissions across the UAA. But today, given the few minutes that we have available, I'll concentrate on one particular one that we're extremely proud of, and this is the Mountain Protection Award. We're very grateful also for the support from Bali and the Bali Peak Outlook Foundation, who saw the value in supporting this particular initiative for mountaineers of the world. Next slide, please. So rather than listening to me, how about we show a video about what the Mountain Protection Award is about, and in particular the 5 key areas that we are focusing to highlight as part of these awards. Thank you very much. Next slide, please. So I hope that's given you an overview of what the key themes that the award is seeking to reward. And as you would have noticed, there is a specific category on waste management. And for us, it's particularly important to make sure that waste management is not just about picking up rubbish for others, on behalf of others, but actually address their particular core issue in relation to waste, which is also related to education and having the awareness of what that waste actually does as an impact to the mountain environment. So it's about instilling values about what a real mountain steward should be about. So this year, with the COVID situation, we've had some challenges in terms of being able to hold the award in person as we would normally do every year. So what we've done is combine the proposals that we received from 2020 and 2021 into one category. So this was just awarded last Friday, and we had a total of 24 projects from more than 30 countries and 6 continents. And unfortunately, we saw quite a lot of challenges for many of the proponents in terms of being able to implement their projects in the mountains, given the many restrictions that were in place to, in fact, be physically in the mountains. But nevertheless, we selected quite a number of projects that have been able to fulfill a substantial amount of work in the mountains that go beyond the everyday practices. So we had the opportunity to award the Best New Initiative, which is a waste management concept that is still being implemented in the Chamonix mountain area of Mont Blanc. And this particular project was quite insightful because it's about making rid of rubbish bins, in fact, so that people make conscious efforts to, in fact, whatever they bring, they also need to bring back out. So it's not someone else's problem to deal with the waste, but in fact, it's our own initiative and responsibility to deal with that. And then we also had a runner-up project. This is the Makilikari Peaks project in Ireland. And they have a very innovative approach to also engaging with the local community and landowners to address problems related with access and also responsible access to the mountains, and what that means for those who engage in mountaineering and mountain activities in consultation and in collaboration with the local communities. And this was incredibly important to also emphasize the need to engage with local people. And the winners of the Mountain Protection Award that were just announced last week are a particular project that we are very proud of, and this is about an opportunity to engage with young people and to bring them to the mountains to support their training, not just in terms of mountain skills and other skills related to the personal and professional development, but mostly to be able to engage with the mountain when dealing with mountaineering practices. So on the next slide, I will allow you to see a little clip of what this video is all about. So let's take a trip to the Grand Paradiso National Park, where this project actually takes place.
Good afternoon from Gran Paradiso National Park in Italy. We are deeply honored and very excited to receive from UIAA this important award. The idea of Giroparchi Nature Trail started in 2011 within the project Giroparchi. Our project is addressed to young generation and has 2 main goals. On one side, to increase their awareness of the exceptional natural heritage of the Gran Paradiso National Park, understanding its fragility and the importance of a sustainable approach. On the other side, to improve their English in order to communicate Gran Paradiso values worldwide. The High Altitude Week of Giroparchi Nature Trail is an unforgettable experience for our teenagers, full of adventure, hiking, climbing, funny outdoor games, and also sleeping in the alpine huts of the Gran Paradiso valleys. We were very touched by the words that UIAA spent for our project, and particularly by 4 concepts in which we strongly believe: sharing knowledge, dive into the natural world of the oldest national park in Italy, enhance teens' personal development, and foster stewardship and sustainability values. We are extremely glad to share this success with all the people who contributed to our project. we would like to thank in particular Gran Paradiso National Park and the Alpine Convention for their support. Above all, thanks to the all people who, with their passion and energy, contributed to the success of this initiative. Thanks in particular to Davide D'Acunto, Linda Colling and all the teachers of the English Center and my great team in Fondation Gran Paradiso. In these 10 years, we met more than 200 teenagers and more than 400 parents that trust in us. Thanks to this award, we will organize a special reunion with all of them to celebrate our mountains together. So, thanks again for this important recognition to UIAA.
Thank you very much. Next slide, please. And I believe this is my final slide. So indeed, just to wrap up, fostering a community of mountain stewards, for us, it means supporting a shift in mindsets and values towards mountain protection. And that has to be embedded as part of what we do in our mountaineering practice. It's not something that we think afterwards, but it's something that is innate to our nature. And working collectively, we raise awareness about the importance and fragile nature of mountains for people and the ecosystems that depend on them, not just in the mountains, but worldwide. And at the same time, making sure that we recognize and reward those great examples of mountain protection so that we are in a position to also scale and transmit the key lessons learned so that we may replicate and also make sure that this is, inspires actions in other contexts and other parts of the world. And with that, I conclude my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Carolina, for making us travel and for the very positive and inspiring different project that you showcase, and also a testimony of the importance also of creating communities across the world that share also values. So thank you very much for this. And now it's time for some other or for more success stories. And for this, we are very fortunate to have with us Leiza Nikolaeva. And Leiza is an experienced project manager in the areas of climate change and risk reduction, environmental protection activities, and sustainable development in Eastern Europe, Caucasus, and Central Asia. She has also prepared a global assessment on plastic pollution in remote and mountainous areas. You have the floor, Leiza.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, all colleagues. I take a control. Yes, thank you. To show my slides. Well, after such presentations of previous speakers and also after such nice videos, it will be difficult to impress you with something, but I would like to present our exercises. Wait, sorry, how can I shift to next slide?
Click on the slide.
I do, yeah, okay. And now I need to go back. Right. So in the framework of the project that Jost presented already, we also prepared and collected a number of case studies of success stories from different continents, from different ranges, mountainous, but also remote areas, to demonstrate that already now many activities are ongoing and many efforts, but by different actors and also at different levels are taken. So we also announced a call for submission of case studies by the experts, and if those experts are present today with us, we would like to send them for submitted case studies from their experience. We also used and renewed some case studies that are already in the waste mountain outlook for the mountain regions. And we collected and presented more case studies. So overall, we have more than 50 case studies, again from different continents, and we grouped them into 4 categories of these initiatives. So first category, we collected, we put together all initiatives that are related to policy. And here you can see an example from Nepal when where they introduce garbage declaration and clearance system for all expeditions and all hikers. So basically, they are requested to declare all items and food items before and after their expeditions, so that in the end they can receive a clearance certification and they can prove that the waste that they generated in the upper camps they brought down to the valley or brought down to the place where they can dispose. The second type of initiatives, we analyzed infrastructure initiatives. And here you can see an example from Kazakhstan, from Tanshan, that this initiative was implemented on the territory of national park. And this, thanks to this initiative, this national park became a first national park in Kazakhstan that implements the whole waste environmental sound management of waste, the whole cycle of waste management on its territory. So using the EPR system, EPR operator designed special trucks and also installed containers, waste containers in 30 different sites on the territory of national park. The third category of initiatives we identified as financial initiatives, and here is example from Kyrgyzstan, from the Pamir Mountains, where through financial incentives and through remuneration, they organizers motivated local guides, hikers, volunteers to collect waste from the upper camps and bring it down. I personally also participated in this action, and today symbolically I wear this t-shirt, which I can show you, which I received by participating in this cleaning up activity in Pamir. And of course this tradition is continuous, and every year many climbers and companies participate in this action. And the fourth category we identified as clean up and awareness raising activities. And here is example from the Alps, different alpine countries with many volunteers and many players and support from local authorities, from alpine clubs, from huts. They organize such big events, awareness raising initiatives, supported with the cleanup activities. And the example is a cleanup tour, which started in 2001, and now it's 20 years. Since it is active, and a lot of attention is brought through mass media, through social events, and through social media. summarizing my presentation, I would like to bring some conclusions and policy insights to prevent, minimize, ensure the environmentally sound management of plastic waste in the mountain areas. So first of all, as was already said today, that local plans on plastic waste management are very important to develop and to introduce into the policies and development plans. As we know, the responsibility for waste, solid municipal waste, including plastic waste, goes with the local authorities, and not often local communities, municipalities have financial and human resources to deal with. Thus, these financial mechanisms and incentive schemes could help to support municipalities. We also call for local solutions, since these areas are isolated and have limited connections to bigger centers. We also suggest to organize different types and different audience targeted awareness raising events and education initiatives. And also important to say that local municipalities, but also personally, every one of us, we should not excuse ourselves and put everything, rely on cleanup activities, but we also need to feel a responsibility for our behavior and our habit in the mountains. And many initiatives in the protected areas also demonstrated that protected areas, because they have direct communication with the visitors, they could demonstrate these good examples how to behave with the waste, with the plastic waste, and they can also help to distribute widely among visitors these ideas to reduce, to reuse, and to avoid plastic pollution in the mountains. Thank you very much, and happy International Mountain Day.
Thank you very much, Elisa, for what was also a very impressive presentation, and I think it was great that you could also offer example from many different regions of the world, showing that this is a concern of everyone. And also thank you for the very concrete and pragmatic ideas and solutions on the way forward. And now, last but not least, we have Matthias Jurek, who will address some initiatives on how to foster individual and collective action. Matthias is a program management officer with UNEP, and he manages flagship projects and initiatives related to sustainable mountain development, focusing notably on climate change adaptation, ecosystem management, environmental governance, and use of Earth observation. You have the floor, Matthias.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, also a warm welcome on behalf of UNEP again. And happy International Mountain Day ahead. I basically want to wrap up the session today in terms of to showcase you what we can actually do in terms of acting individually, but also collectively to address the plastic pollution crisis in mountains. And you have heard from the previous presentations, it needs really a kind of paradigm shift. And it's really great to see a lot of actors, not just our organization, but a lot of institutions already quite active on this front. But there's, of course, a lot of more opportunities that we have at the moment. And the ongoing discussion for a possible agreement on to prevent plastic pollution is also, I think, an amazing opportunity to mainstream mountains into the discussions. Next slide. So creating this kind of paradigm shift at the global level, I think it also really needs to see what are kind of other actors out there that we can use the voices and also their kind of networks to bring change and advocate for change and also support concrete action. And I'm happy to announce that on the occasion of International Mountain Day, that Nirmal Purja, who is a famous Nepalese mountaineer, will join our group of mountain advocates, advocating in particular for the plastic pollution crisis in mountains. I guess, and I hope most of you are aware of him. He has a current documentary on Netflix, 14 Peaks. He managed to climb the highest peaks in the world in a 6 month and 6 days world record compared to 7 years. So he's quite hyped at the moment. I can really encourage you to watch this stunning documentary. And he's quite active really on fighting against the pollution crisis in mountains. And he's also in the phase of organizing a big mountain cleanup. So you've also seen before, but there's a lot of already happening in terms of cleanups, not only in the Alps, but also in other parts of the world, including in the Hindu Kush Himalayas. And it's actually quite important that we also try to find avenues and platforms and initiatives to work with such prominent people and other organizations to see how we can really work collectively together in order to reach out to other communities, in order to reach out to other stakeholders to make this kind of system change and paradigm shift in support of the pollution crisis in mountains. Next slide. Working, of course, with UNEP, there are many other opportunities how we can also contribute to the nature, but also pollution and climate crisis. As we speak in UNEP, it's a so-called triple planetary crisis. And one initiative that I guess most of you are aware is also the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, which was launched this year on the occasion of World Environment Day. And this is actually not just an initiative which is driven by UNEP and FAO as the kind of leading agencies, but it's something that we all own, and we are part of a kind of global movement, which was launched by the UN General Assembly. And the aim of the UN Decade is really, on the one hand, to halt the degradation of and restore ecosystems, including mountains, also achieve the global goals, which are linked to the triple planetary crisis. And in this regard, it's important to note the nature crisis, the pollution crisis, and the climate crisis are all interlinked. And of course, to enhance people livelihood. And within the decade, everybody of us has the opportunity to become active, be it a member state, be it an NGO, be it an ecosystem restoration partner who has concrete experience with restoration on the ground, but also be it as an individual by, for example, planting trees and support the restoration efforts, which of course is quite important also in terms of the pollution crisis. Next slide. If you want to check out concrete case studies about mountain ecosystem restoration, I've just listed some here. For example, in the Carpathians, which is not too far away from Switzerland, of course, the restoration of old growth forests is quite important, and we do quite a lot of work in terms of protection and maintenance of ecological corridors. Going further east in Bhutan, community-based mountain forest restoration, but also the restoration of grasslands is quite important on the one hand to increase the resilience to climate change, but also to reduce conflicts of communities with tigers, for example. So there's a lot of restoration examples that partners have been promoting and also currently working. And please check out the UN Decade website to see what are the opportunities in terms of the UN Decade. It has been just kickstarted, so we have 10 years ahead, and I hope every one of us can make a contribution to that. Next slide, please. As we're also celebrating International Mountain Day, I also would like to announce that together with the International Olympic Committee, which is also very working closely with sports federations, we are going to launch 10 simple steps, what it can actually mean if you want to become a mountain hero. And if you look at these different steps, you will see some of these are probably some familiar with which each of you, if you are a mountain tourist, for example, which I hope, but maybe there's some other kind of inspiration for you to get inspired and to become active to protect the places you love. For example, how you travel to the destinations and what are the kinds of means of transport that you're picking in order to visit a mountain area. Also, what you do in terms of the waste. We have heard today it's quite important really to leave not trace behind and also take it back to you, and also to see what kind of products you are consuming, that you really try to focus on consuming local products. But of course, you can also serve yourself as a role model and help to inspire other people for your different networks. So we can all be part of this kind of system change and be part of a kind of global initiative to become a kind of mountain hero yourself. You don't have to be, of course, a mountaineer yourself, but there's a lot you can contribute. And please check out our website. There's a couple of information and stories being published by UNEP today and tomorrow on the occasion of Mountain Day. And I hope you also join, of course, the general restoration in support of the UN Decade. Otherwise, please, thank you very much for your attention. Happy International Mountain Day, and of course, look forward to any possible questions in the chat.
Thank you very much, Matthias, and also for giving us some insights on initiatives also from UNEP, and for all the outstanding work, and also for mentioning something that can happen also at the government level, but also at the individual level. With this, we have concluded the part on presentation, and we still have some time for Q&A. There was a few questions in the chat. There was some were already answered, but I think we had an interesting question also on the issue on financial resources, and of course saying that all of these actions require funding, and a question of who can fund and support those initiatives. And maybe before giving the floor to one of our panelists, also reminded that some actions of course will necessitate funding, but some also individual action, like for example the take-in take-out principle that was highlighted by some doesn't need financial means. So I don't know if on the issue of financial means and technical assistance, if maybe Jost or Matthias or even Patrick, who maybe has some perspective from Rwanda, wants to answer.
I would be happy to add a few words, but I would be happy to give the others the floor first, whoever wants to come in.
No, I think you can go ahead, and the other can complement if this is okay.
Okay, sure. Thank you very much. And indeed, I think it's a very, very good question, very relevant question indeed, because as you said, individually, there's a lot we can do, but at the same time, we also need the infrastructure, which of course has certain cost implications. I think there is several things that can be done, and I would like to go back also to what I said before about the different levels at which we need to take action, right? So, for example, at the local level, but actually also at the national level, one option that could be done is to implement extended producer responsibility schemes, right? So, for example, bring together major companies that produce plastic products or that sell plastic products, and bring them together so that maybe a share of every plastic product they sell could be used for a fund, which in turn then can be used to finance the setting up of a collection system in certain mountainous municipalities, for example. That could be an option. Another option, for example, that could be taken is to implement tax systems. So there's already several countries around the world that have introduced, for example, a tax levy on both imported and produced plastic products, which can then be channeled into a fund that is explicitly meant to cover interventions towards the environmentally sound management of plastic waste, or waste more generally, of course, is also an option. So there are these tools available, and then in addition to that, there's also other tools available that are a bit more small scale, such as and it's not that always about financing the intervention, but also making the intervention cheap. So, for example, one interesting case study we had in our collection of case studies was where they asked people to bring back waste, and for every kilogram or so of waste that was collected by the tourist or mountaineer, they would receive a little present, like a reusable cup, for example. So you actually engage them in the initiative, and you give them a nice present that actually makes them help reduce their footprint in the future, and at the same time it doesn't cost much. So there's also these innovative schemes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Joost. And I think that it was very informative. And I think Patrick had also some thoughts he wanted to share.
Mine is just sharing Rwanda as example. For example, as I have already mentioned in my remarks, we are having what you call environmental review for those companies that are having a grace period of 1 year. They're supposed to pay 90 Rwandan francs per each kilogram of the plastic, single-use plastics that imported for packaging their juice and water. And this money is collected by private sector federation in that certain fund, and then the money collected comes and contribute for the waste collection and recycling to the recycling companies. So there is a need of financial, but we can start from ourselves and look for what I can call homegrown solutions. And even we try to come together as one, and we make sure that we clean our environment, because by the end, we are the one that we got affected by it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Patrick, for this additional thought. I don't know if Matthias from UNEP wanted to add something.
Nothing in particular. I think, as I said, I mean, of course, in the last years, the pollution crisis building plastic was very much on the agenda in terms of ocean. So I think this is a really great opportunity with Mountain Day also to shed some light on the mountains, and I hope this will be also useful to see if governments can come in and also support this, and also providing financial opportunities in terms of fighting the pollution crisis. I mean, obviously, governments, donors have, of course, their agendas in terms of mountains, and we do work very closely with donors on the development cooperation side. A lot of has been focused, of course, on climate change and adaptation, biodiversity, but maybe with this pollution topic upcoming, we also hope there is a great opportunity to do some support concrete action. And of course, there's a big gaps also in terms of data and knowledge. We learned today, and also through other studies, that there's information about microplastics, but of course, there's also much information needs in terms of what are the downstream implications in terms of rivers and all of that. So I think there's a lot of research, also gaps to be filled in, and there's of course great, fantastic research network works with the MRI to work on this, but of course support is also needed to fill in these research gaps. And we're happy, of course, to UNEP to see, once the research is out, how we can help it to use it for advocacy and work with governments on respective policy change.
Thank you very much for this. And I think that Carolina has just written that she has a comment also. Carolina?
Thanks, Tamaris. I think that it's a very important question, the financing. And indeed, our experience at the UIA is that the contributions and support from foundations and other entrepreneurships, like the Valley Outlook Foundation, has been instrumental in us being able to also channel this support to those communities that engage in such activities. But what I want to also highlight is the importance of acknowledging the non-financial in-kind contributions that go into all of these efforts. It would not be possible for us to do it without the incredible large amount of volunteer spirit that goes into being able to realize these projects and engage in the community. At the UIA, we are all working voluntary. So this is important for us to also recognize as part of the equation by which we value and take stock of the efforts needed to make sure that we address such an issue collectively. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Carolina. This was also an important comment. We also had some questions on how people can also engage more on this dialogue and how they can be more involved in the series. And just to let you know that Jen will be in touch with you. And maybe one final question that we can take was related to the global agreement, a treaty on plastic pollution that I referenced, and also my colleague from Rwanda. It was a bit of a discussion on what are the status and next steps. I don't know if Patrick, if you want to say something on this.
Just during COVID, we reviewed the final version and we sent the comments together with the representative from Peru. So we are in touch and we are still looking for how we can start with the signature. So that is the final status it has.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Patrick. And yes, so now we have a resolution, as it was mentioned, from Rwanda and Peru. It has, I think, around like 45 co-sponsor. And the idea is to be able to launch the process and establish a body that would be mandated to negotiate such a treaty end of February, beginning of March at UNEA 5.2. But this gives me some sort of a good transition. You will hear a bit more about next events, and there will also be an event, I'm sure Diana will mention this specifically also on the issue of this global agreement. But as we're running a bit out of time, I just I don't want to, to do a summary, but maybe a few key points. I think it's now clearer than before that it's an issue of global concern and that we cannot tackle it alone, that we'll need all hands on deck, and as Patrick says, also join hands. I think it was also clear that we need to work at all levels, from local to global, and we heard a number of fantastic initiatives also at the local and regional level. But I think, as it was highlighted from BRS Secretariat, UNEP, and also by Patrick, there's also a need to engage at the global level under the auspices not only of existing initiative in the context of Basel and Stockholm, but also in the run-up to UNEA and trying to foster global action to tackle plastic pollution. I think it was also clear that data and knowledge needs to be enhanced, and a few reports and upcoming research were mentioned. So I think we'll very much look forward to read them and to factor this in our reflections. And maybe a final point was the importance of education and raising awareness on this issue of plastic pollution also in the mountains. And I think that this kind of event and knowing about all these initiatives also greatly contribute to this. And I'm hoping this is not the end, but the start of further engagement and conversation on this. So with this, I will hand it over to Diana.
Thank you very much, Damaris, and to all the speakers for their valuable contributions and to this very interesting discussion. I think, and I'm also not going to summarize. Just want to thank you, and for those who were with us and those who will later have the opportunity to see this video. The summary will be available on the webpage of the event. So thank you all. I just wanted to highlight here some upcoming events for the mountain lovers, an event that is happening where some of you here who were on the panel will be involved. It's an event that is taking place early this afternoon. Climate change and forced migration in mountain areas. What are the solutions? I know that Carolina is involved in this event. We have our friends from Zoe, and it's happening with the IPU, the International Parliamentarian Union. And to come back on the plastic series, the discussion continues as we run up to the UN Environmental Assembly. And the next session will take place on the 13th of January, should take place on the 13th of January. It's a session we are co-organizing also with Grid Arendal and with our colleagues from the UN Environmental Management Group on the launch of their report on the UN system response to marine litter and plastic pollution. That will take place on that platform on the 13th of January. You can already start registering. There's a change in date, you will be informed. And we have 2 more sessions as part of this series before the UN Environmental Assembly. One where we are going to address the basis for financial cooperation and technical assistance in a new plastic agreement. That one should take place on the 18th of January. And the last one, UNEA, UN Environmental Assembly 5.2 high-level dialogue on a global instrument on plastic pollution, where we will indeed discuss the resolution and what is expected to be achieved at the UN Environmental Assembly. That one should take place on the 1st of February. We will keep all the attendees of this session informed on these events. And with that, we have a few other events for those who also love to touch other topics coming up next week. So still a busy time before we all go on leave with our families. One is on, again, another event on the road to the UN Environmental Assembly, where we will discuss one of the resolutions and a report that was prepared by UNEP on the establishment of a science policy panel for chemicals, waste and pollution. And also interesting in this context where we discuss plastic pollution. So I invite you to join us next Tuesday at 2 p.m. Geneva time. And at the Thursday next week on another topic related to climate, we will discuss cities and the achievements of the UN Climate Change Conference that took place in Glasgow. And how this related to cities, what are the next steps. And this is something that our friends from the Geneva Cities Hub are organizing, and that we are assisting them, partnering with them in this very specific session of their city diplomacy series. With that, once again, thank you very much for the attendees that were with us online. Thank you really to our speakers for these amazing presentations. The documents, the summary, the video, everything will be available on the webpage of this event. The link has certainly now been shared in the chat, and if there were important questions that remained unanswered, we will also get back to you. So thank you all for your great work, and looking forward to collaborate again with all of you.
Thank you very much.